Before I start, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the traditional custodians of the land. I had the privilege of visiting and interviewing many Ngamba, Maori and Yuwalarai peoples from Brewarrina, as well as the Maori and the Yuwalarai people of Gaduga. I'd also like to thank the Gadigal people of Redfern, who I visited as well on my trip. Currently in the Australian outback. Tomorrow I'll be visiting Brewarrina and I'll also be visiting Gaduga. I'm quite nervous for these interviews because I don't want to offend people, I guess. I don't want to just kind of barge in and feel like I'm invading somewhere that I don't belong. But I'm hoping that I can learn a lot and try and be as respectful as possible going into these interviews. I'm hoping to learn some of the differences in Aboriginal teaching in the country compared to in the city, as well as how culture and language is taught, as well as spiritual practices. Overall, what it is like to be an Aboriginal person going through schooling from current and in the past, how it's changed, all these kind of things.
So my name's Bradley Hardy. Now, my background from my dad, I'm a Yarralii Nyimba person, and from my mother, I'm a Kamilaroi and also Kuma person. But I do tours of our fish traps in the museum and share a lot of our history. The thing is, what we try to do is share a lot of that stuff, like where our people ate certain foods. We'd like to share that with the fish traps, for example. How our people caught, stored. So we share with people, not only people worked out a way to catch fish, store fish, but they left spaces in the river where fish can still keep swimming upstream. So like I mentioned earlier, roughly 30 to 40% of the fish would get caught and stored, the other 60 to 70% would swim upstream to breed to spawn. So sustainability at a high level. I failed in that system, education system, because I couldn't catch on in that world. Yet I've taught doctors, lawyers, solicitors, as you know, like I've educated Google on certain stuff, but that's not me, that's just what my old people taught me. So they really done it. The lecturers in universities, they say, we seem to can't teach that stuff where the students, the uni students engage straight what you were saying and they caught on straight away, but us teaching in classrooms. So in saying that I'm not educated in that system, but I'm educating that system. We had the young people that we just done one recently, Dark Emu, with Bruce Pascoe, that documentary, where the young people from here, and I shared with the younger people, this is what you got to say on that documentary, talking about your catches and your storages or your fish traps, and they got involved in film, yeah. So in that film, people were standing up applauding a lot of the roles people did in that film, and whether it be with the younger fellas or whether it be old people talking.
Well, by telling those stories and like showing different things, making it more, rather than just reading something off a wall.
No, that's it. It comes from
the
here.
heart.
Here, even though there's a lot here too, but it's the passion we have for it. That's that's our duty. Old people don't share these things with us if we're not going to do it. So the old people share that with us, and that's our duty to keep it evolving.
Look, I don't call myself a teacher, and I don't just see the kids in the school. I see them everywhere. You know, if they got a question for me down the river, they can ask me at the river. They can ask me in school. They can ask me at the footy over. They can ask me anyway. You know, because I'll see them anyway. I take the kid out, show them what tree I'm talking about, or what fruit there is coming on, or whatever. You know, it's not just a 9 to 3 thing. It's local language. Get the kids used to hearing the sounds, getting the sounds of it into their bodies, and also have a context for it. So, if you're talking about animals or trees, they see the animals, they see the trees, and then they know what tree it is or what animal it is, and they know the names for it. Well, there was no such thing as language and culture in the school when I was at school. When you went to school, There was no value in language other than English. There was lucky to be one or two Aboriginal people working in the place. Everything's done in English. You know, you live in the world, in everything from your health to your money, to your education, to your housing, it's all done in English. So you learned English and you learned English the best you could, and that's what the whole education was, in English. But, you know, when you have a home life though, and when you're out with your friends doing other stuff, and you talk a certain way, or you do things together, and you've got names for things, or your grandparents are telling you stuff, that's different.
Yeah.
But that's not school.
K's from Lightning Ridge, 500 kilometres from Dubbo, and approximately 900 kilometres from Sydney. My name is Malcolm Banks. I'm the principal at Gadooga Central School. We run just like any other particular school. Gadooga is a very rural and remote Indigenous community. The community is population about, I'd say about 160 now. It's 99.99% Indigenous. There are limited job opportunities in Gadooga itself. In stage 6, which is years 11 and 12, we're part of what they call an access program, which is the Northern Borders Access Program. Because our students, we don't have the huge amount of numbers such as the Sydney school do, we can't offer the subjects here at the school because we don't have the teachers. So we join up with 3 other schools, which is Boggabilla, Mungandai, Colonel Bright and Gadooga make up the MBSA program. So our senior students have a lot of video conferencing classes. So if I haven't got a history teacher at the school here, but Mungandai do, they will join, the 4 schools join up with that particular teacher to do video conferencing. So they still have the opportunities to do that. We're very heavy on work transition, so we start a very big program in year 5 and 6 in our primary, and we also carry that right through to year 10, and we'll have a traineeship. That traineeship then becomes part of their HSC Pathways program and their pattern of study, and they go to work while they're at school because there's no casual work here that they can do after school. Not like, you know, you can go and pack shelves at Woolies. So we do block delivery where they are, depending on where they have their traineeship and with who, they'll go and do that, you know, once or twice a term for a week, giving them the opportunities to be involved in that, and also to receive an education that will hopefully fast track them when they leave school into job opportunities. The school is very much a hub of the community, in which we do a lot of cultural events here at the school. We encourage our students to be very, very proud of their culture. We have a very big, as I spoke about, a very big cultural and language program at the school. So students from kindergarten to year 10 will be involved in Uraloi language, because we're on Uraloi land, and will also be involved in the cultural programs that we have, which we could be looking at bush tucker, it could be looking at how their elders were raised in the community. We're very mindful of making sure that continues within the school. We have a very big dance program, Aboriginal dance program, where our cultural garden is down the back of the school. We had the police minister and some high-ranking officers attend Gadooga 2 weeks ago. So our students dance for them down in the cultural garden. So it's all about making sure that they're respecting their culture and having opportunities to learn about their culture. You know, we're very lucky in the fact that we're actually in that community where we can experience those particular, going out onto country and doing that. So with that, we have a very big Indigenous Games that's held every year. So we have probably, well, this year we had 34 schools attend, and they come here and they ask, they might arrive earlier before the games and want a cultural experience. So there's things that we'll do in the cultural garden with them. I'm very lucky here that I have 2 AEOs and 5 tutors that were born and bred in Gadooga, so they know the importance of the education that we're providing. My AEOs might take a class and explain to them how they lived in a tin humpy, no running water and things like that. So we're very lucky to have that, and I think that's what makes us very unique in Gadooga compared to the way that it would be taught in schools in Sydney. Because we need to remember that students need to be, or children need to be at school till they're 17, whereas before, when it used to be 14 or even younger, where they would leave school and go out and work, on a sheep station. They'd learn how to shear when they were 11 or 12. So there's a lot more emphasis now on getting that education and making sure that they have got some type of qualifications after their name, so they're not going out working on stations. If they want to do that, that's fine, but I think it's changed in the way that the education within the community is more valid.
Providing them with that choice of what they want to do.
What they want to do, and very, very insistent that we have the children at school. We want every student here, we want that 100% attendance, which is sometimes unrealistic. So we're looking at 90 to 100% making sure they're here. There's no excuse for them not to be here. So we have a very big breakfast program for our students here at school, which they didn't have years ago. We have a very big lunch program here too. So students that can't use the excuse, well, I haven't got lunch, or I didn't have breakfast, so I couldn't come to school. So all those type of things are now embedded into the school program. Elders will say to us, well, you're doing too much for them, but you need to do that because of, to make sure they're here at school. So our AEOs are very important in ringing them if they're not at school, going for home visits. Our tutors are in the class with them all the time, being that supportive person with them.
I'm Kaylani, I'm from Gadooga. I'm part of the Uralarai tribe, I'm in Year 12, along with you.
You can say the same thing as well.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
I'm Jasmine. I'm also in Year 12, and we go to Gadooga Central School. I'm on Uralarai land, but my tribe is Nyemba.
One of the main things here that does work well is the one-on-one support with other students. Whereas in larger cities like say Sydney or Brisbane, you don't really get that. And you've got the kids out here that aren't really good with their learning, they're not good with reading, counting. And out here we actually have special lessons that they decide to the bell.
We'll just wait.
Yeah, it's a benefit, and because we have a lot of students here that, like I said before, can't read, can't really write, aren't good with multiplications, we have these special lessons that actually happen down in the library. I also think that they just feel more comfortable here. They're surrounded by families, friends. The teachers here do offer quite a lot of support. They don't give up on the students, push them through.
We also have the work experience, so they provide us a lift down to Dubbo 1 week each term, and they provide everything for us, a place to stay, food, everything we need. Sometimes even clothes for some kids that don't have any money. And if the workplace goes well, they sign us up for a traineeship. So we have a full-on working job down Dubbo and also we can work in the holidays.
Do you think that kind of thing helps give you guys options, I guess, so you can choose whatever path you want?
Yeah. So when we go down for the work experience in Year 10, we get to pick we have 5 days. What's it called? The 5 days, 5 career things. So you can do hospitality in one, you can do nursing in another, you can go and work at Chemist Warehouse or something, just a different thing every day. You go to one, and you write down how you felt about it, things you did, what you rated it out of. And then if you want to go back and work, like, we just get the teachers to talk to the company and all that, and then that's how we get the traineeships done.
Are you guys like interested in learning more about like your traditional language or your culture, and do you think the school helps to implement parts of it in the teaching?
Yeah, they do. A lot of the teachers here are actually very passionate about Aboriginal studies and just the culture in itself. We do have like lessons like specifically just dedicated to that, like culture and load. But load's more of a primary thing that they start with, and then culture's what they do more as they're getting up into high school, which is pretty good. Like, everyone takes it seriously. They all get in, have a go. We have that web page going now, don't we?
Yeah, we have a jewellery web
we
page.
have a jewellery web page going at the moment.
Where all of our students make different kind of Aboriginal jewellery, and we sell it to people.
And we've
that
already
are
got orders
interested.
coming in.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have the cultural gardens down the back, and we've been growing those for a few years now, because there used to like be nothing down there, and one day someone was just like, let's go and turn it into a garden, which we did. So we've got the mulberries, finger limes, we've got even capsicum and like baby tomatoes and everything down there. And so when we have food tech, most of the time we'll just go down there, get the things that we need, bring it up and use those.
That's good. So you've talked about the positives. What about the negatives? Is there anything you'd think you should change if you could about the school, or like something that frustrates you maybe that one of the city schools might have that you don't have access to?
I'd say faster working internet, honestly, because the internet out here is just extremely slow. I'd also say, because you've got the kids like having to travel away like for like nearly an hour or so or more to get their license done, to get their key cards done. Like, we have nothing here to actually just have it done within the town. Like, we have to travel, and the health service here actually wasn't working at one point, so people had to travel to like Dubbo or to Sydney to get proper treatment for certain things, like certain sicknesses.
Got more nurses.
Yeah, they began like talking to the Lightning Ridge Hospital, and now like a nurse there will just come over whenever they can, just to support it.
After feeling initially quite nervous going into these remote communities like Brewarrina and Kadooga, I thought the experience was really helpful actually in learning a bit more about their culture, and I felt like I understand more and I'm more confident now in the way I interview. The experience in Kadooga, staying there for 3 days, being a student at the school, getting to experience a culture class, a photography class, study in the Year 12 space with some of the other students. It was very interesting, and they taught me a lot about how it's similar but also different to learning in the city. As for Brewarrina, it was a completely different thing. I learned from two more unconventional teachers who teach outside of the school system through on-country learning, using things like the river and showing what where ancestors used to feed, gather, all these different things that help bring together communities and get a greater understanding for these young Aboriginal kids who are intrigued about learning more about their culture. For the second part of my opinion piece, I'll be talking to Aboriginal educators across the biggest city in all of Australia, Sydney!
Feeling like the Santa Claus and everything around. Gotta fix some sugar and you never make a sound. Sweet.
Sugar-coated lies, we don't wanna talk about it. Such a sweet disguise, and we just gonna dance around it.
Chasing that, chasing that, chasing that.
More specifically, I'll be on Gadigal land in Redfern, where I'll talk to parents, students and teachers from two of the biggest private schools in Sydney, International Grammar School and St Andrew's Cathedral School, with their second part school, Gawarra, which they put Aboriginal kids through until they move on to high school and merge together. I hope to learn why Aboriginal parents put their kids through scholarship programs that might take them away from their family back home further in the country, and what are some of the difficulties and reasons they do this. I'm also curious how teachers manage to teach on country when they're living somewhere in the city, and Aboriginal students might be coming from all across Australia from completely different communities, and as well as this language. It's quite difficult because there's so many different languages across Australia. I really want to know, I guess, how they manage teaching language to these students when their traditional language will be completely different. I also wonder if there's any social differences and like difficulties for Aboriginal kids that say have many less Aboriginal peers at a scholarship school, or maybe feel disconnected from the other people that go to their school.
My name's Nairi Davison. I'm 17. My dad is Danguddy in Gadigal, so that's near Port Macquarie on the coast, and obviously the city of Sydney. And my mum is Gamilaroi, which is west, north, near Coonabarabran, and that's where we come from. I go to International Grammar School. I'm in year 12. I've been there since kindergarten because I was put on the Indigenous scholarship there, which is from kindergarten to year 12 all the way through. And I basically ended up there because at the time me and my mum were living in Redfern. She had an Indigenous cafe on one of the main streets there, so it just happened to be a school that was close by and was providing a really good scholarship. IGS is actually pretty good with their approach to, Indigenous students and creating a sense of community. Like I said, they do scholarships, which is 2 Indigenous students put on a scholarship in kindergarten every year. Unfortunately for me, I was the only person at the time that I applied to actually get the scholarship and go through, so I'm the only Indigenous person in my year. But we do have things that create a sense of community within the school, such as Koori Club, so that's kind of a gathering of all the Indigenous students where we just get together and have a bit of a yarn and chat, which is, creating that sense of community. Obviously that's a really good approach to not only getting the kids to know each other, but getting them to have close relationships. I know a lot of students that have already graduated that I'm pretty close with, and I'm able to say I'm friends with now because of that. I do wish there were more ways for students to get in after kindergarten, because like I said, I am the only Indigenous student in year 12, and I feel like it's really important to have senior Indigenous students as role models for the younger kids, because there are a lot of younger ones. So if we can maybe have more pathways into the school for Indigenous students. Also, I think another thing that IGS should be doing is introducing more Indigenous clubs and opportunities, not only limited to Indigenous students. I know for a very short amount of time they were teaching a language, but I don't believe it was the City Sydney Nation. I believe they did have a language club running for a short time that was a Indigenous language, and that was for the Indigenous students, but it actually stopped running. So I think we should get more like Indigenous cultural practices and activities into clubs for not only Indigenous people but non-Indigenous as well. I think for a lot of the students, they enjoyed getting their hands on any type of Indigenous language, which was so good.
Yeah, do you know any other ways that Indigenous language has been taught at IGS?
Oh, no, so I'm pretty sure the only way that Indigenous languages are being taught at IGS is through clubs, which are optional. But if you ask me personally, I say we should be able to enroll in like a TAFE course or something like that, and maybe even have lessons, because I know we get pulled out of Koori Club, but I think it would be really good to also get some of the younger kids involved and not limit it to high school or just primary school. And as for like the Indigenous students of IGS come from a range of different places and mobs and different areas, but I don't think that really affected anybody's ability to understand the language that was being taught for the short period of time that it was. I think it was just really good for them to have that opportunity, but I would prefer if the school would get some options, which is hard to do because, a lot of languages are lost or hard to find stuff on, but I think they're doing as much as they can.
How is culture taught at IGS for Aboriginal students, and non-Aboriginal even, non-Indigenous, sorry, even? Like, is it taught just to the Indigenous kids or both? And what are some of the challenges, I guess, because the school's in a city, so it'd be a lot harder to do on-country learning.
Yeah, okay, that's really good. I'd say in a practical sense, IGS is very limited to their approach for cultural practices. I believe they did have weaving, which was open to Indigenous and non-Indigenous students for a short amount of time, and I myself made a plant club that was based off native plants to Australia and how Indigenous people used them, and I was teaching it through the seasons of the Indigenous people that were Gadigal, because I thought it was important to embrace, you know, the fact that we are on country, our school is already on country, and we can utilise that. The problem I faced with the playing club I was running was that, like, it wasn't an interest to people, you know, I didn't get enough people to have the club running. And when I did have enough people for the amount of time that I did, because we were in the city, I was trying to get excursions. Like, I had planned to take people out where, like, there was practical uses being put to Indigenous plants. Like, I had this place in mind, but it was just so hard to organise everything because we were so far away from it. And I don't think it's about the fact that country is missing from the school, because everywhere in Australia is country to somebody, but I think it's just about the accessibility and the fact that it is in the city. You know, there's so many regulations to do with schools and you can only do so much.
Do you think part of the issue then is that it's put a lot of pressure onto, I guess, students, because the school itself doesn't really run any informal classes, like it's all external, if that makes sense, and run by students like yourself?
Yeah, I think so, totally. And like, I felt almost a cultural obligation to allow people the opportunity to understand their own culture a little bit more, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, there was only so much that the school could provide for me. Like, there wasn't really funding. I'm pretty sure the Indigenous department doesn't get a whole lot of help either, and obviously they're trying to reach out and trying to be more productive with that, but I don't know what I was saying.
Sorry. You alright?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
What are some of the differences between IGS and a remote school that may have a greater proportion of Indigenous students?
Well, I can answer this pretty personally, because even though I've gone to a private school in the city all of my life, my mum grew up going to Coonabarabran Public School, and actually she's thinking about moving back there and allowing my younger brother to attend because of the differences it has in comparison to my school. I feel like with remote communities, the connection to culture is so much easier to cultivate. Specifically in Coonabarabran, the public school actually has like agriculture as an option in school. You know, you can just take it as an elective. And I feel like that's really important for a lot of Indigenous people who have a calling to give back to, obviously, the connection to the earth we have. That can't really happen in the city, you know what I mean? IGS is a private school, and while it has pathways for Indigenous students, I think it's a lot harder for them to get into it, you know what I mean? As for public schools, it's like in remote communities, especially where the population of Indigenous people are higher, it's just easier to have that sense of community.
What would your ideal school look like? Would you choose a city school or country school, and what would you change about that system of a city school and a country school to make it ideal for your kid?
Country school, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, I think it's been easier for me than for a lot of other Indigenous kids to be at a school in the city that's off country for most of them, but I'm Gadigal, so you know, I've lived my whole life on country and have no idea what it's like to be away from home, even though obviously home is a lot of different places for me, but I'm always at home one certain point of time, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't want my kids to be raised in the city. But yeah, I would raise my kids in a country town for it to be on country if it had the same opportunities as the private school I go to. Probably because of the fact that it's going to be a lot easier for them to connect naturally with other Indigenous kids.
I am Lavinia Gibbs, and I'm a proud Yuwalawai woman from Garuga, a little community located in northwest New South Wales, and I have very strong ties to the Gamilaroi peoples of Walgett. I'm currently living in Redfern. I've been a resident of Redfern community for about 3 years, and it's the closest that I've ever felt to home since moving away from Garuga over 20 years ago. I've been in Gawara school for 7 years. This has been my 7th year now. I was first employed as a classroom teacher where I began to teach stage 1, so I was on a year 1 and 2 class. And I quickly established a reputation for my knowledge in Aboriginal cultures and histories and perspectives. And I worked my way into a position as Aboriginal education consultant that allowed me to work with students and teachers to develop the confidence and develop curriculum that would enable access to Indigenous perspectives across the whole of junior school and Gawara school. So the pros of Gawara, the access to the school is accessible for students within the urban city area. The resources are up to date, 21st century resources. The training of the staff that work at the school is elite. Being a Christian environment, they're open to being able to explore how they can better enhance Indigenous perspectives within their school curriculum. Some of the cons of working in a school like Gawara is that there can sometimes be lack of access to resources that enable our students to immerse themselves in cultural learning. It's inside of a building. And we quite often have to go on excursions that require travel. So once a year our students will go, and I think this could be a pro as well, you know, having the resources to be able to do it. Travel out of Sydney to be able to access cultural learning like the South Coast. One year we've been up to Cape York where we were with the traditional owners in far north Queensland. But it's very difficult for the kids to be able to continue that connection when they come back into the school space and maintain direct connection with being in a building and learning from out of a book or from resources like YouTube clips. I know that a lot of the people and a lot of the students that live in Sydney, a lot of their families are from rural communities like mine, and their families can be spread out all across New South Wales, so we quite often have students who have a disconnect with their family and their culture because they live down here in Sydney. But then, you know, there's the flip side of that is that there is such a rich access to holding on to culture here through by way of activism. Like Redfern's a really, you know, prominent place for the activism for Aboriginal rights in education and all other aspects over the years. So you have to reach out and have the knowledge of how to reach outside of our school community to be able to gather the information and put it together so that the students are able to learn from that content and relate to it and for it to be relevant to them at this time. So how I'm able to teach kids connection to culture, language, histories is by sharing my story, who I am as an Aboriginal woman. You know, as I've developed my teaching skills and my management and my knowledge, both building on what I know and as an Aboriginal person and the knowledges that I already have, as well as how to incorporate that in mainstream learning system, I have been able to incorporate a lot of my personal journey and a lot of my story into the teaching that I can provide for the kids. So that's how I've been able to expose and immerse a lot of the students that I work with into Aboriginal perspectives. But not every teacher has the luxury of being able to do that, and I can see that there's really big gaps there in terms of you know, fear of doing the wrong thing. A lot of non-Aboriginal teachers do, you know, there is a genuine good intent there, but there still is that fear of doing the wrong thing, and I think, you know, that's where it's our responsibility as educators to close that gap between having the cultural load put on Aboriginal staff members to be able to deliver all of this content, more so that then having Aboriginal staff members be a part of a team that develops the skills together and reassures one another that this is what we can teach in our school system. So then, you know, they're lucky to have had Aboriginal staff members in there that have been able to share their personal journey, but there's not many not every place has access to Aboriginal people who fully understand and know their journey too, through the disconnect of culture. So my experiences as an educator in a Sydney school is very different to what my experience was as a student in a rural community, in an isolated rural community. Garuga is 1,000 kilometres from Sydney. At the time that I was there would have been less than 80 students in the whole school. Our country schools are very much centred around community, wants, community needs, what community can provide. We had aunties and uncles training the netball teams and taking us away for our sport. We had a lot of our elders and a lot of our family members who provided cultural knowledges and knowledges about, for instance, my dad worked in the shearing shed, so some of our excursions were about going out and actually partaking in excursions that were relevant to what we were growing up with. And they still do river days and go down and live sustainably and teach the kids how to live sustainably off the land. That's not something that we'd be able to have direct access to here in the city. So, the contrast between my education as a country girl and my education as a city educator is very different, but it's allowed me to be able to see the gaps that I faced over the years in having to move from my community into the city to have access to educational opportunities that would give me equitable access to the resources in society, money, housing, shelter, food, transport. Those were things that would have been scarce out where I was living. Like the first shop was 5 hours away to be able to buy fruit and veggies. So we had big freezers, and Mum and Dad would cut up a sheep and have that in the freezer for periods of time where we wouldn't travel to these big places for 4 and 5 months between shops. And then I'd come down here and the access to education and to housing and to clothing and to food, it's all at your doorstep. And I think, my parents wanted us to be able to not have to struggle and labour to be able to get those things as they did when we were growing up. Through that journey that, I've been able to develop a skill set that has enabled me to deliver that to diverse students and diverse demographics that I've built a really big interest in Aboriginal education and perspectives with the non-Aboriginal students at our school over at Gawara, and bridged a big cultural gap between both of our... I've been a part of bridging that cultural gap between both of the schools, which is probably something that I may have struggled to do if I stayed in my own hometown.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's like straight in the middle of it. Yeah, moving from Gaduga to Alexandria from such a young age. Do you want to just speak about that social change, I guess?
That was social shock.
Yeah.
That was absolute social shock. Like I spoke to you, like I alluded to in my story, it literally was one day between I live in Gaduga and now I live in Alexandria. That was one day. Mum basically said, you're going to Sydney with Nan tomorrow, and that was it. And whilst I look forward to it, I was also really scared and really nervous. I was enrolled in a school here at Tempe High School, and it was one of the most multicultural schools in Sydney. And that cultural shock really forced me to have a look at who I was and what role I played in the world, and what role I wanted to play as an Aboriginal person in this world from that point forward. And my journey hasn't been a straight one. I've had my ups and downs, I've had my troubles, I've struggled with aspects of intergenerational trauma, and I've been able to find a place for the grief in my life and having to move away and disconnect and then be part of the joy of reconnecting and staying connected, and realising that, you know, although I was living off country, that connection really never did break.
Yeah.
It was just the mentality that I thought that I'm far away from home now, I don't have access to it. And I explain to you now as an adult, because I've been able to build and piece together my story over the years, I've been able to open up a channel where I can live comfortably off my home country and now maintain a spiritual and physical connection with my hometown by way of setting up programs as an educator that allow other kids who may potentially have to move away for education to understand what that may be like before they even have to set foot out of the town. I'm really, I feel like that's a flower, you know, like that's a flower in the journey for me. Like it's something beautiful that I can take away from a story that had a lot of downs, but you know, I've been able to come out the other side of that now and establish beauty in that. My life journey is now paving the way for other students who will need to leave their community to be able to establish, you know, a life that is fulfilling and that's purposeful.
Would you like to, as a mother of two Aboriginal kids, maybe with all these experiences, being in both a rural school and a city school, as well as teaching in a city school, where does choosing the school for them to go to come into play, and how do you help maintain their connection to their identity and heritage and things like this?
So it's inherent, it's their birthright, you know, their direct connection to culture comes through me, and it's my responsibility to maintain that, and that comes through, you know, my lineage and relates back to community. So we go home fairly often. Most holidays, we try to get out there to mum and dad, spend time on the land. But even living in city, in Redfern here, I have family that visit from the country all the time. And just like our home would be out at Gaduga, I have an open door policy here. So my mob comes and stays. There might be a mattress on the floor, and my kids are regularly witnessing the power of storytelling and sharing, and you know, catching up with family members and hearing about what's going on back out at home. So we're still known, we're still a part of all of those things, and understand how we can contribute back there if and when we needed to. In terms of choosing a school for my kids, I've always wanted to have them somewhere where their identity was celebrated rather than questioned. I think I spent a lot of my teenage years, you know, feeling like I had to prove that I was Aboriginal. And then, you know, living off country and not having that direct connection there made that really difficult, because I had to establish myself in other Aboriginal communities, and that was really hard. So I made some promises to myself as a mum that when I had children, if they needed to access education, then I would move with them for them to be able to do it. Being a school teacher and being trained in education gave me good stake in what school that they could be in too, because I could also apply to be in the same space as the kids. So the way that the Gawara popped up for me, and the way that it came into my life, was that I wanted to re-establish myself outside of Bathurst. I'd always wanted to work in a school where there was a majority, if not 100%, First Nations kids, because it's always been a passion of mine to be able to see other children flourish and overcome some of the obstacles that it takes them to overcome in mainstream education systems. And I had heard from my sister that her son had just gotten into this great school that was in the city, and I looked it up online, and there happened to be a teaching job advertised. I applied. It was just a domino effect. I'd applied for it. I got a phone call the next day. I had an interview 2 days after that. Once in a lifetime opportunity I would have been able to have to be in a school where there's 100% population of Aboriginal children, teach in a school, as well as have my children go through that schooling system. It was almost like a magical shift for me to be placed where I'm placed now. So although I'm moving out of the classroom space to focus more on guiding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students through education whilst maintaining and strengthening their cultural identity, I'm still grateful to be able to have my children in a space like Gawara and like St Andrew's Cathedral School, because they understand a part of my journey, and while it's ideal that we, as an Aboriginal woman, I'd want my kids brought up as culturally as I possibly can, it's also important that they have access to quality education, and be given the chance to build a life that is equitable, and that they can use the resources that they gain from having a quality education to be able to do what they want with that education and what they want with their indigeneity, with them being Aboriginal kids.
Obviously, when putting your kids into the school, you knew about the transition from Gawara to the senior school, middle school and senior school, where it's the combining the Aboriginal cohort with the non-Aboriginal cohort. Did you see that as a positive when doing it, or negative, or a bit of both?
I think there's pros and cons in all schools when it comes to enhancing educational outcomes and attainment for Aboriginal students. And I could see that we needed to make choices at our schools where our kids were able to spend more time with the junior school. So there's been decisions and choices put in place over the years that have allowed us to continue to try and bridge that gap between jumping from Gawara school to middle school and senior school, and it's something to be worked on. But as I can look and reflect on my experiences in what I see with my children there, their friendship groups are growing bigger and bigger. Given that they have a solid cultural identity coming from home, they can stand strong in who they are, and they feel no need to be anyone other than who they are with the friends at school that they have, because it is such a diverse and multicultural community. So try and overcome the obstacles that such a big jump might take, going from Gawara schooling to senior school.
It's quite similar to what you had yourself.
Exactly. And irrespective of where we are in our life, there is going to be a time and a place where we're going to have to make that jump anyway.
Hi, I've just finished editing the final cut of the documentary, so I thought I'd just give my final thought. Working on this project, it was quite enlightening for me, to be honest. I thought in my time in Aboriginal studies I'd learned quite a bit, and I'd chosen this topic, quite frankly, because not only was it an area of interest for me, but I thought it was one of my stronger topics. But I still learned so much on these different trips. I learned the significance of the Borana fish traps. I learned that a lot of these rural towns, they don't have accessibility to things like hospitals, supermarkets, very essential things. And I also learned how difficult it can be for Aboriginal people to leave their home, to
go all the way into the city for a greater chance at education. So I hope you guys learnt something too, and thanks for watching my documentary. It means a lot. I would like to thank also everyone who helped me along the way in my project, especially those who are willing to put themselves out there by having a yarn with me on camera. I only ended up using 7 out of the 11 consultations I had, therefore I feel quite obliged to thank those who I didn't end up using the documentary. These 4 people were still really helpful in guiding me through a greater understanding of Aboriginal education system and what it means to them. I'd like to thank Luciana Tribuya, Nadia Williamson, Mindy Gibbs and Michael Kirk, who gave me some wonderful insight onto what Aboriginal education is like from their perspective.
I'll let you cut if you say anything dumb.
What if I say that about all of it?
Well, that's not very helpful. But I guess you could.
There's 2 seconds of me going, I'm getting more, and then you're fine.
Special lessons that they decide to hit the bell.
We'll just wait.
Yeah.
Do you want to just introduce yourself and say who you are, where you're from?
I'm Lavinia Gibbs. I am a Yuwalarai woman from Northwest. Again. My name is Lavinia Gibbs. I am a proud Yuwalarai. Tongue-tied.